Part 1. The Beginning of the End. The sun set slowly over the quaint suburban neighborhood, casting long shadows that stretched across manicured lawns and quiet streets. In a modest, two-story house at the end of Oak Street, a sense of tension hung in the air. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on a steaming cup of tea that she had no intention of drinking. Across from her, Peter was absorbed in his laptop, the rhythmic clacking of his keyboard, the only sound breaking the silence. They had been married for 15 years, a union that had once been full of promise and passion. Their early years together were filled with spontaneous road trips, late-night conversations, and shared dreams. But over time, life had settled into a monotonous routine. Peter's career in finance had taken off, demanding long hours and frequent travel. Emma, an artist, found herself increasingly alone, her creative spirit stifled by the walls of their home. Tonight, however, was different. Emma had spent the past few weeks wrestling with a decision that had weighed heavily on her heart. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was deeply unhappy. The love she once felt for Peter had faded, replaced by a sense of emptiness and longing for a life she could no longer imagine within the confines of their marriage. "Peter," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, distracted, his brow furrowed. "Yes?" "We need to talk," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I can't keep doing this. I'm leaving." The words hung in the air, sharp and irrevocable. Peter stared at her, his expression one of confusion and disbelief. For a moment, he said nothing, his mind struggling to process the reality of her declaration. "What do you mean, you're leaving?" he finally asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and anger. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "I mean, I can't stay in this marriage any longer. I need to find myself again, to live a life that makes me happy. I'm sorry, Peter." Peter's world seemed to collapse around him. The life they had built together, the memories they had shared, all of it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over in the process. "You can't just walk away," he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty house. "We made vows, Emma. We promised to stay together, no matter what." Emma wiped a tear from her cheek, her resolve hardening. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I've made up my mind. I'm leaving tomorrow." With that, she stood and walked out of the room, leaving Peter alone with his thoughts. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of her words sinking in. He sank back into his chair, his mind racing. How had it come to this? How had he missed the signs of her growing unhappiness? As the evening turned into night, Peter sat in the darkened kitchen, the cold tea untouched before him. He felt a deep, gnawing emptiness, a void that he didn't know how to fill. Emma was his world, and the thought of losing her was more than he could bear. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second a painful reminder of the time slipping away. And as the hours passed, a sense of despair began to settle over him, a despair that would only deepen in the days to come. Part 2. The Hollow House. The next morning, the house on Oak Street was eerily quiet. The usual hustle and bustle of the morning routine was conspicuously absent. Peter awoke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. For a brief moment, he had hoped that the events of the previous night were just a bad dream. But as he reached out to the empty side of the bed, the cold sheets confirmed the painful reality. Emma was gone. He stumbled out of bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. The house felt different without her presence, as if the very walls had absorbed her departure. He made his way downstairs, each step echoing in the empty halls. In the kitchen, he found a note on the table, written in Emma's neat handwriting. "Peter, I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. I hope one day you'll understand why I had to do this. Take care of yourself. Emma." Peter read the note over and over, his eyes burning with unshed tears. The finality of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. She was really gone. The realization settled heavily on his shoulders as he crumpled the note in his fist. Days turned into weeks, and the emptiness that filled the house seemed to grow with each passing day. Peter threw himself into his work, trying to drown out the pain with endless spreadsheets and meetings. But no matter how busy he kept himself, the loneliness gnawed at him, a constant reminder of what he had lost. Their friends reached out, offering words of comfort and support, but Peter found it hard to respond. He avoided their calls and messages, isolating himself further. He couldn't bear the pity in their voices, the well-meaning but empty reassurances that time would heal all wounds. One evening, Peter found himself sitting on the living room couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls. He glanced around at the photographs that adorned the shelves and walls, images of happier times. There they were, smiling and carefree on their honeymoon in Paris, laughing with friends at summer barbecues, embracing each other during winter holidays. Peter picked up a photo from their wedding day, his fingers tracing the edges of the frame. In the picture, Emma looked radiant, her eyes sparkling with joy and love. He remembered how they had danced that night, wrapped in each other's arms, believing that nothing could ever come between them. "What happened to us, Emma?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice breaking. The house offered no answer, only the silent echo of his words. Peter set the photo back down, his hands trembling. He drained the rest of his whiskey, the burn in his throat doing little to numb the ache in his chest. As the days continued to pass, Peter's routine became a blur of work, alcohol, and sleepless nights. His colleagues began to notice the change in him, the disheveled appearance, the vacant look in his eyes, but he brushed off their concerns with forced smiles and empty reassurances. Inside, he felt himself unraveling. The life he had known, the future he had imagined with Emma, all of it was slipping away. And as much as he tried to hold on, to find some semblance of normalcy, the weight of his grief was becoming unbearable. Peter knew he needed help, needed to talk to someone, but the thought of opening up about his pain was too overwhelming. So he continued to bottle it up, hoping that somehow he would find a way to move forward. But deep down, he feared that the hole Emma had left in his heart would never heal. Part 3. The Downward Spiral. Peter's attempts to maintain some semblance of normalcy were becoming increasingly futile. His once impeccable work ethic began to wane, and his performance at the office suffered. His colleagues exchanged worried glances, whispering behind his back, but Peter was too lost in his own misery to care. One evening, after another grueling day at work, Peter found himself at his favorite bar. The dim lighting and the low hum of conversation provided a temporary escape from the emptiness he felt at home. He sat at the end of the bar, nursing his third whiskey of the night. "Rough day?" the bartender asked, placing another drink in front of him without waiting for an answer. Peter nodded, offering a weak smile in response. "Something like that," he muttered, staring into the amber liquid. The bartender, a burly man named Jack, who had seen his fair share of troubled patrons, leaned in slightly. "You've been coming here a lot lately, Peter. Everything okay?" Peter sighed, the weight of Jack's concern pressing down on him. "Just dealing with some personal stuff," he said, trying to sound casual. "It'll pass." Jack gave him a knowing look. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it, you know. Holding it all in doesn't do anyone any good." Peter looked away, the truth of Jack's words hitting too close to home. He knew he needed to talk to someone, but the thought of baring his soul to a stranger was daunting. Instead, he downed his drink and signaled for another. Hours passed, and the bar began to empty out. Peter's vision blurred as the alcohol took its toll, but the pain in his chest remained stubbornly present. As he stumbled out into the cool night air, he fumbled for his phone, dialing Emma's number out of habit. The call went straight to voicemail, and he was greeted by her familiar, yet distant, voice. "Hi, this is Emma. I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message." Peter's heart ached at the sound of her voice. He stood there, swaying slightly, trying to find the right words. "Emma, I miss you. I don't know how to do this without you. Please come back," he slurred, before ending the call and shoving the phone back into his pocket. The walk home was a blur, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he finally reached the house, he fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them in his drunken state. Inside, the house was dark and silent, the emptiness amplifying his despair. Peter collapsed onto the couch, his head spinning. The alcohol did little to numb the pain. If anything, it only intensified his sense of loss. He glanced around the living room, his eyes falling on the wedding photo he had looked at so many times before. "Why did you leave me, Emma?" he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Why couldn't we make it work? The silence was deafening, offering no solace or answers. Peter's thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. He felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of grief and loneliness, with no way out. In a moment of desperation, he reached for the bottle of whiskey he had brought home, taking several long swigs. The burn in his throat was a welcome distraction, but it wasn't enough to drown out the anguish. As the night wore on, Peter's thoughts turned increasingly dark. He couldn't imagine a future without Emma, couldn't see a way to move forward. The thought of enduring another day, another hour, another minute without her was unbearable. The bottle slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor and spilling its contents. Peter barely noticed, his mind consumed by a single, haunting thought. He couldn't survive this. Part 4. The Breaking Point. The days blurred into one another, each one indistinguishable from the last. Peter's routine had become a hollow shell of what it once was. He moved through life on autopilot, barely aware of his surroundings or the people in it. Work was a distant haze, his tasks performed with robotic precision, but devoid of any real engagement. His once tidy appearance was now disheveled, his eyes darkened by sleepless nights and the heavy burden of grief. His colleagues at the office had grown increasingly concerned. Sarah, his closest friend at work, finally decided to confront him. She found him sitting alone in the break room, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee. "Peter, can we talk?" she asked gently, pulling up a chair next to him. He looked up, his eyes dull and lifeless. "Sure, Sarah. What's up?" Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We're all worried about you. You haven't been yourself since Emma left. Have you thought about talking to someone? A professional, maybe?" Peter's expression hardened, a flicker of anger and pain crossing his face. "I don't need a therapist, Sarah. I'm fine." Sarah reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "No, you're not fine, Peter. You're falling apart, and it's okay to admit that. You've been through a lot, and you don't have to go through it alone." Peter pulled away, his jaw clenched. "I said I'm fine. Just drop it, okay?" Sarah sighed, seeing the walls he had built around himself. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Please, just think about it." Peter nodded absently, his mind already drifting back to the darkness that had become his constant companion. He watched Sarah leave, a pang of guilt briefly piercing through the numbness. He knew she was right, but the thought of opening up to someone, of reliving the pain, was too much to bear. That evening, Peter found himself back at the bar, the familiar surroundings offering a brief respite from his torment. He sat in his usual spot, nursing a drink and staring at the rows of bottles behind the counter. The bartender, Jack, approached him with a look of concern. "Hey, Peter, how about something different tonight?" Jack suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "Maybe a soda or some water?" Peter shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. "Whiskey, Jack. Just keep them coming." Jack hesitated, then poured the drink. "You know, drowning yourself in booze isn't going to help." Peter downed the whiskey in one gulp, the burn doing little to dull the ache in his heart. "Maybe not, but it's all I've got right now." The night dragged on, and Peter continued to drink, each glass further blurring the edges of his reality. He stumbled out of the bar well past midnight, his thoughts muddled and his steps unsteady. The walk home was a familiar fog, the streets empty and silent. When he finally reached the house, he fumbled with the keys, his frustration mounting as he struggled to unlock the door. Once inside, he collapsed onto the couch, the weight of his grief pressing down on him like a physical force. In the darkness, his thoughts turned increasingly desperate. He couldn't escape the memories of Emma, couldn't silence the voice in his head that whispered of his failure. The isolation, the loneliness, it all became too much to bear. Peter reached for his phone, scrolling through the contacts until he found Emma's number. His finger hovered over the call button, his heart aching with a longing that words couldn't express. He knew she wouldn't answer, knew it was pointless, but the need to hear her voice, to feel some connection, was overwhelming. He pressed the button and brought the phone to his ear, the familiar sound of her voicemail greeting him once again. "Hi, this is Emma. I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message." Tears streamed down Peter's face as he listened to her voice, the pain cutting deeper with each word. He took a shuddering breath, his voice barely a whisper. Emma, I'm so lost without you. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to keep going. Please, come back, please. He ended the call, the silence that followed more suffocating than ever. As he lay there, his mind spiraled into a dark abyss. The thought of facing another day without her was unbearable, the emptiness consuming him. Peter's resolve crumbled, and he made a decision that he hoped would bring an end to his suffering. He stumbled to the kitchen, opening the drawer where they kept the medications. His hands shook as he emptied the contents onto the counter, his mind numb with despair. As he stared at the pills, a part of him screamed to stop, to reach out for help, but the darkness was too overwhelming. With a trembling hand, he began to swallow them, one by one, the world around him fading into a blur. Peter collapsed to the floor, the last remnants of consciousness slipping away. In the final moments, he thought of Emma, of the life they had once shared, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. The house on Oak Street remained silent, a testament to the love and loss that had unfolded within its walls. And as the night turned into dawn, Peter's broken heart found a tragic, final peace. Part 5. The Aftermath. The early morning sun cast a soft golden glow over Oak Street, bringing with it the promise of a new day. The neighborhood began to stir with the sounds of children getting ready for school and commuters starting their daily routines. But in the house at the end of the street, an ominous silence hung heavy in the air. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She had tried calling Peter several times that morning, but each call went unanswered. The final, desperate message she left on his voicemail echoed her growing concern. Peter, please, call me back. I'm really worried about you. Unable to focus on her work, Sarah decided to check on him in person. She drove to his house, her heart pounding with a sense of urgency. When she arrived, she noticed that Peter's car was still in the driveway. She knocked on the door, her anxiety growing with each passing second of silence. Peter, it's Sarah. Are you in there? She called out, pressing her ear against the door. When there was no response, she reached for the spare key that Peter had given her years ago for emergencies. She hesitated, but her fear for his safety overrode any reservations she had about invading his privacy. The door creaked open, and Sarah stepped inside, calling his name once more. The house was eerily quiet, the air thick with an oppressive stillness. She walked through the living room, her eyes scanning for any sign of Peter. As she approached the kitchen, she saw him lying on the floor, motionless. Peter! She screamed, rushing to his side. Her hands shook as she checked for a pulse, relief flooding through her when she found a faint but steady beat. Her eyes fell on the scattered pills on the counter and the empty bottles nearby, and her heart sank with understanding. Sarah grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. I need an ambulance quickly. My friend has overdosed, she explained, giving the dispatcher the necessary details. As she waited for help to arrive, she stayed by Peter's side, holding his hand and whispering words of encouragement. Hang on, Peter. Help is on the way. Just hold on, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours before she finally heard the sound of sirens approaching. Paramedics burst into the house, their efficiency and professionalism providing a stark contrast to Sarah's panic. They quickly assessed Peter's condition, administering first aid and preparing him for transport to the hospital. Sarah followed the ambulance in her car, her mind racing with worry. At the hospital, she was directed to the waiting room, where she paced back and forth, wringing her hands. The sterile environment and the distant beeping of medical equipment did little to calm her nerves. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor approached her. Are you here for Peter Sullivan? He asked, his expression serious. Sarah nodded, her heart in her throat. Yes, I'm his friend. How is he? The doctor sighed, looking down at the clipboard in his hands. He's stable for now. We were able to pump his stomach and administer medication to counteract the overdose. It was a close call, but he's going to pull through. Sarah's knees almost buckled with relief, and she sank into a chair. Thank God, she whispered, covering her face with her hands. Can I see him? The doctor nodded. He's still unconscious, but you can sit with him. It might be some time before he wakes up. Sarah followed the doctor to Peter's room, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and sorrow. When she entered, she saw Peter lying in the hospital bed, an array of tubes and monitors attached to him. His face was pale and his eyes were closed, but he was alive. She pulled up a chair next to the bed, taking his hand in hers. "Peter, I'm here," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be okay. We'll get through this together." Hours passed, and Sarah remained by Peter's side, her presence a silent testament to her unwavering support. As the day turned into night, she refused to leave, determined to be there when he woke up. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the window, Peter stirred. His eyelids fluttered, and he groaned softly, his eyes slowly focusing on Sarah's face. "Sarah?" he croaked, his voice weak and raspy. "I'm here, Peter," she said, squeezing his hand. "You're safe now. You're going to be okay." Peter's eyes filled with tears, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry." Sarah shook her head, her own tears falling freely. "You don't have to apologize. We're going to get you the help you need. You're not alone, Peter. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, Peter felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread to hold on to in the midst of his despair. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the faint stirrings of a desire to fight, to survive. And with Sarah by his side, he knew he had a chance to find his way back from the darkness. Part 6. The Struggle to Heal. The days following Peter's overdose were a whirlwind of medical evaluations, psychiatric assessments, and difficult conversations. Sarah remained a constant presence, her support unwavering as she helped Peter navigate the complexities of his recovery. In the sterile, quiet environment of the hospital, Peter had plenty of time to reflect on the events that had led him to this point. The memories were painful, and he often found himself overwhelmed by waves of guilt and regret. But amidst the darkness, there was also a growing awareness of the people around him who cared deeply for his well-being. One afternoon, a psychiatrist named Dr. Jacobs visited Peter's room. She was a calm, empathetic woman with a reassuring presence. She pulled up a chair beside his bed and introduced herself. "Hi, Peter. I'm Dr. Jacobs. I've been assigned to help you through this process. How are you feeling today?" Peter shrugged, his eyes downcast. "Tired. Lost." Dr. Jacobs nodded, her expression understanding. "That's completely normal, given what you've been through. But I want you to know that there is a way forward. It's not going to be easy, but with the right support and treatment, you can start to heal." Peter glanced at Sarah, who was sitting in the corner of the room, giving him an encouraging smile. "I don't even know where to begin," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Let's start with small steps," Dr. Jacobs suggested. "We can arrange for you to see a therapist regularly, someone you can talk to about everything you're feeling. There are also support groups where you can connect with others who are going through similar experiences." Peter nodded slowly, the idea of talking to someone both daunting and strangely comforting. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll try." Over the next few weeks, Peter began attending therapy sessions with Dr. Jacobs. The first few sessions were difficult, as he struggled to open up about his feelings of abandonment, his guilt over Emma, and the profound loneliness that had consumed him. But gradually, he started to find his voice, expressing thoughts and emotions that he had long kept buried. One day, during a particularly intense session, Peter finally confronted the core of his pain. "I feel like I failed her," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "I couldn't make her happy, and now she's gone because of me." Dr. Jacobs listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. "Peter, it's important to remember that relationships are complex. It's rarely one person's fault when things don't work out. Emma made her own choices, and while it's natural to feel guilty, you can't carry the entire burden of responsibility." Peter's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded, taking in her words. "I just miss her so much." "I know you do," Dr. Jacobs said softly. "It's okay to grieve, but it's also important to start thinking about how you can rebuild your life. What are some things you used to enjoy doing? Things that made you feel happy and fulfilled?" Peter thought for a moment. "I used to love hiking, Emma and I used to go on hikes all the time, and I enjoyed reading, but I haven't picked up a book in months. Dr. Jacobs smiled. Those are great places to start. Finding small activities that bring you joy can be incredibly healing. And remember, it's okay to take things one day at a time. With Dr. Jacobs's guidance, Peter began to reintroduce small pleasures into his life. He started going for short walks in the nearby park, feeling the fresh air and the sun on his face. He picked up a novel that had been gathering dust on his shelf and found himself getting lost in its pages. Each small step, though difficult, helped him feel a bit more connected to the world around him. Sarah continued to be a pillar of support, encouraging Peter and celebrating his progress, no matter how minor it seemed. They began spending more time together, not just as co-workers, but as friends. They would go for coffee, watch movies, or simply sit and talk. Sarah's presence was a reminder that he wasn't alone, that he had people who cared about him. One afternoon, while they were sitting on a park bench, Sarah turned to Peter with a thoughtful expression. You know, Peter, I've been thinking. Maybe it would be helpful for you to join a support group. It might help to talk to others who have been through similar experiences. Peter considered her suggestion, feeling a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. I don't know if I'm ready for that, he admitted. That's okay, Sarah said gently. But when you are ready, just know that it's an option. And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way. Peter smiled, a small but genuine smile. Thanks, Sarah. I don't know what I would do without you. As the weeks turned into months, Peter's journey of healing continued. There were good days and bad days, moments of progress and setbacks. But through it all, he held on to the hope that with time, he could find a way to rebuild his life. And with the support of Sarah, Dr. Jacobs, and the new connections he was beginning to make, he felt a growing sense of strength and resilience. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Peter felt a flicker of hope. He knew that the journey would be long and difficult, but he was determined to face it head-on, step by step, one day at a time. Part 7. Finding Connection. Peter's journey toward healing was marked by small victories and deep introspection. He continued his therapy sessions with Dr. Jacobs, finding solace in their candid conversations. Each session peeled back layers of his grief, allowing him to confront his pain head-on. His walks in the park grew longer, and he found himself more engaged with the world around him. But there was still a void, a lingering sense of isolation that he couldn't shake. Sarah's suggestion about joining a support group lingered in his mind. The idea of sharing his story with strangers was intimidating, but he knew it might be the next step he needed to take. One evening, after much contemplation, he decided to attend a meeting. He found a local group for individuals dealing with loss and depression, and with Sarah by his side, he mustered the courage to go. The meeting was held in a small community center, the room filled with a circle of chairs. The group leader, a kind woman named Maria, welcomed Peter warmly and introduced him to the others. There were people of all ages and backgrounds, each with their own story of heartache and healing. As the meeting began, Peter listened intently to the others. He heard stories of loss, struggle, and resilience. Each person spoke with a raw honesty that resonated deeply with him. When it was his turn to speak, he hesitated, his throat tightening with nerves. But then he glanced at Sarah, her encouraging smile giving him the strength to continue. My name is Peter, he began, his voice trembling. My wife, Emma, left me a few months ago. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. I tried to end things. He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But I'm still here, and I'm trying to find a way to move forward. The group listened with empathy, their silent support giving Peter a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long time. As the meeting continued, he found himself opening up more, sharing details of his relationship with Emma, his struggles with guilt and loneliness, and his fears for the future. After the meeting, Maria approached him. Thank you for sharing, Peter. It takes a lot of courage to open up like that. We're here for you, whenever you need us. Peter nodded, feeling a glimmer of gratitude. Thank you, Maria. It feels good to be heard. In the weeks that followed, Peter continued to attend the support group. Each session brought new insights and a deeper understanding of his emotions. He began to forge connections with the other members, finding comfort in their shared experiences. One person in particular, a man named David, became a close friend. David had lost his wife to cancer, and his journey of grief and healing mirrored Peter's in many ways. The two men often met outside of the group, going for walks or grabbing coffee. Their conversations were a mix of light-hearted banter and deep, meaningful discussions. David's presence was a reminder that healing was possible, that life could find new meaning even after profound loss. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the park, David turned to Peter with a thoughtful expression. You know, Peter, healing isn't just about moving on, it's about finding new purpose. What do you love? What makes you feel alive? Peter considered the question, his mind drifting back to his younger years. I used to love painting, he said slowly. I haven't picked up a brush in years, but it always made me feel free. David smiled. Then maybe it's time to start again. Find that part of yourself that brings you joy. Peter nodded, the idea sparking a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, he went home and dug out his old painting supplies. The canvas was dusty, the brushes stiff from neglect. But as he set up his easel, he felt a surge of anticipation. He began to paint, his strokes tentative at first, but gradually growing more confident. The colors blended and swirled, creating a reflection of his inner turmoil and burgeoning hope. Hours passed, the act of painting becoming a form of meditation, a way to process his emotions without words. As the weeks turned into months, Peter's paintings filled the house, each one a testament to his journey of healing. He started attending art classes, meeting others who shared his passion. The creative process became a lifeline, a way to express the inexpressible. Sarah continued to be a steadfast presence in his life, her support unwavering. She celebrated his progress, encouraged him during setbacks, and shared in his newfound joys. Their friendship deepened, becoming a source of strength and comfort for both of them. One day, Sarah suggested they organize an art exhibition to showcase Peter's work. You have a gift, Peter. Your paintings tell a powerful story. I think it would be wonderful to share that with others. Peter hesitated, the idea both thrilling and terrifying. I don't know, Sarah. What if no one likes them? Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with pride. It's not about what others think. It's about sharing your journey, your healing, and I believe it will resonate with people more than you realize. With Sarah's encouragement, Peter agreed. They found a small gallery willing to host the exhibition, and together, they planned the event. The night of the opening, Peter stood nervously by his paintings, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Guests began to arrive. Their reactions to his work varied, but overwhelmingly positive. Many were moved by the raw emotion in his paintings, the story of loss and recovery captured in each brushstroke. As he mingled with the guests, Peter felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose he hadn't experienced in a long time. That evening, as the gallery emptied and the last of the guests departed, Peter stood alone in the quiet space, surrounded by his art. Sarah approached him, her eyes shining with pride. You did it, Peter. You shared your story, and it touched so many people. Peter smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. Thank you for believing in me. She hugged him tightly, their bond stronger than ever. We're in this together, Peter, every step of the way. As they left the gallery, Peter felt a sense of hope and possibility. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he knew he wasn't walking it alone. With the support of his friends, his passion for painting, and a growing sense of self-worth, he felt ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time since Emma had left, Peter allowed himself to believe that he could find happiness again. Part 8. New Beginnings. The success of Peter's art exhibition marked a turning point in his recovery. The positive feedback and support from the community boosted his confidence and gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. He continued to paint, his canvases reflecting his journey of healing and self-discovery. His art became not just a hobby, but a passion, a way to process his emotions and connect with others. Sarah and Peter's friendship deepened, becoming a cornerstone of his new life. They spent more time together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly successful day at the gallery, where Peter's paintings were now being regularly displayed, they decided to celebrate. They chose a cozy little restaurant that had recently opened in town, It was a warm, inviting place with soft lighting and a friendly atmosphere. As they sat across from each other, sharing a meal and reminiscing about the past months, Peter felt a sense of contentment that had been missing for so long. You know, Sarah, Peter said, raising his glass of wine, I couldn't have done any of this without you. Your support has meant the world to me. Sarah smiled, clinking her glass with his. You've come a long way, Peter. I'm so proud of you, and I'm happy to be a part of your journey. They toasted to new beginnings, their eyes meeting with an unspoken understanding of the bond they shared. As the evening wore on, they talked about everything and nothing, the ease of their conversation a testament to their deepening friendship. Over the next few weeks, Peter found himself more involved in the art community. He began teaching a painting class at the local community center, sharing his skills and passion with others. The class quickly became popular, attracting people of all ages and backgrounds. Teaching brought him joy, and he found fulfillment in helping others discover their own creative talents. One day, after a particularly engaging class, a young woman approached him. She was holding a painting she had done, a beautiful landscape with vibrant colors. Mr. Sullivan, she said shyly, I wanted to thank you. Your class has been amazing, and I've learned so much. This is for you. Peter took the painting, touched by the gesture. Thank you, Emily. This is beautiful. You've got a real talent. As he left the community center that evening, Peter felt a sense of accomplishment. He was making a difference in others' lives, and it was a fulfilling feeling. He walked home with a spring in his step, the evening air crisp and refreshing. When he arrived home, he found a letter in his mailbox. It was from Emma. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it, unsure of what to expect. Dear Peter, I hope this letter finds you well. I've thought about you often over the past few months and felt it was time to reach out. I want to apologize for the way I left and for the pain I caused you. It wasn't fair, and I'm deeply sorry. I've been working on myself, trying to understand my own issues and make amends for the hurt I've caused. I'm not asking for anything, but I wanted you to know that I regret the way things ended. I hope you're finding happiness and healing. You deserve it. Sincerely, Emma. Peter sat down, the letter trembling in his hands. A mix of emotions washed over him: anger, sadness, relief. He read the letter again, processing Emma's words. It was a small step toward closure, a recognition of the pain they had both endured. He decided to write back, not out of a desire to rekindle their relationship, but to acknowledge the progress they had both made. Dear Emma, thank you for your letter. It means a lot to hear from you and to know that you've been working on yourself. I appreciate your apology and want you to know that I've been on a journey of healing as well. I've found new passions and new beginnings, and I'm grateful for the support of friends who have helped me along the way. I hope you're finding peace and happiness too. Take care, Peter. Peter sent the letter, feeling a sense of release. He had made peace with the past and was ready to fully embrace his future. As the months passed, Peter's life continued to flourish. His art classes grew, his paintings sold well, and he felt more connected to his community. He and Sarah remained close, their friendship a constant source of joy and support. One day, while they were sitting in the park, Sarah turned to him with a thoughtful expression. Peter, have you ever thought about taking your art beyond our town? Maybe showcasing it in a bigger city? Peter considered her words, the idea both exciting and intimidating. I don't know, Sarah. Do you really think I'm ready for that? Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with confidence. I do. You've got so much talent, and your story is inspiring. I think it's time to share it with a wider audience. Encouraged by Sarah's belief in him, Peter began to explore opportunities to expand his art career. He submitted his work to galleries in nearby cities, applied for art shows, and started an online portfolio. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and he soon found himself preparing for an exhibition in a prestigious gallery in the city. The night of the exhibition, Peter stood nervously in the gallery, surrounded by his paintings. The room was filled with art enthusiasts, critics, and potential buyers. He took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Sarah arrived, her presence instantly calming him. You're going to be amazing, she whispered, giving him a reassuring squeeze. As the evening progressed, Peter found himself engaging with the guests, sharing his story and the inspiration behind his work. He received praise and encouragement, and several of his paintings were sold. By the end of the night, Peter felt a sense of triumph. He had taken a leap of faith, and it had paid off. As he and Sarah left the gallery, walking hand in hand through the city streets, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "for everything." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining. "You did this, Peter. I'm just glad I could be here to see it." As they walked, Peter realized that his journey was far from over. There would still be challenges and setbacks, but he was no longer afraid. He had found his passion, his purpose, and a community of support. And with Sarah by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held. Peter looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling brightly above. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of peace and optimism. He was moving forward, one step at a time, toward a future filled with possibility and hope. Part 9. A Growing Light. Peter's exhibition in the city was a resounding success, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. His artwork began gaining recognition beyond his hometown, and invitations to exhibit in other galleries started pouring in. His story of overcoming despair resonated with many, and his paintings, rich with emotion and beauty, captured the hearts of art lovers far and wide. Despite the whirlwind of new opportunities, Peter remained grounded, always remembering the dark place he had emerged from. His therapy sessions with Dr. Jacobs continued, and he maintained his connections with the support group, where he found solace in sharing his ongoing journey and listening to others. One evening, after a particularly successful showing at a gallery, Peter and Sarah decided to celebrate with a quiet dinner at her apartment. They cooked together, laughing and talking, the easy camaraderie between them, bringing warmth and light to the room. As they sat down to eat, Sarah raised her glass. "To new beginnings and endless possibilities," she toasted, her eyes sparkling with pride. Peter clinked his glass with hers, a grateful smile on his face. "To friends who never give up on you." Their friendship had grown into something profound, a bond that had helped Peter through his darkest times. He cherished their connection and the unwavering support Sarah had shown him. As the evening progressed, they found themselves talking about their dreams and aspirations, their conversation flowing effortlessly. "Have you ever thought about traveling, Peter?" Sarah asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Seeing new places, experiencing different cultures, it could be a wonderful source of inspiration for your art." Peter pondered the idea, feeling a spark of excitement. "I have thought about it, actually. There are so many places I'd love to see, so many experiences that could inspire new works. But I've always been a bit hesitant." Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "You've already come so far, Peter. You've faced your fears and emerged stronger. I think you're ready for this next adventure." Her words filled Peter with a sense of possibility. "You're right," he said, squeezing her hand. "It's time to step out of my comfort zone and explore the world." Over the next few months, Peter began planning his travels. He researched art residencies and workshops in various countries, reaching out to galleries and fellow artists. The art community welcomed him with open arms, offering opportunities to collaborate and exhibit in new and exciting places. Sarah was by his side every step of the way, helping with the logistics and offering encouragement. As the departure date for his first trip approached, Peter felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. It was a big step, but one he was ready to take. The night before his departure, Sarah invited Peter over for dinner once again. They sat on her balcony, the city lights twinkling below them, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. "I'm going to miss you, Peter," Sarah said softly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and pride. "But I know this is the right thing for you. You're going to do amazing things." Peter smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "I'm going to miss you too, Sarah, more than you know. But I'll keep in touch, and I'll send you updates and photos from every place I visit." As they sat together, the reality of the impending journey settled in. Peter felt a sense of gratitude for the incredible support and love Sarah had given him. He realized how much she meant to him, not just as a friend, but as a constant presence of hope and strength. "Sarah," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've been my rock, my guide, and my closest friend. I wouldn't be here without you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to take his hand. "You mean the world to me too, Peter. I'm so proud of you and everything you've accomplished, and I'll always be here for you, no matter where you are." The next morning, Peter stood at the airport, his suitcase by his side, ready to embark on his journey. Sarah was there to see him off, her smile a beacon of encouragement. They hugged tightly, neither wanting to let go. "Go out there and show the world your talent," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "And remember, you're never alone. You have people who care about you, wherever you go." Peter nodded, his heart full. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." As he boarded the plane, Peter felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. The world was wide open, filled with new experiences and opportunities. He looked out the window as the plane took off, the city below growing smaller and smaller. His journey was just beginning, and he knew it would be filled with challenges and triumphs. But with each new step, Peter felt a growing sense of confidence and hope. He was ready to face whatever came his way, knowing he had the strength to overcome any obstacle. And as he soared through the sky, he carried with him the love and support of those who believed in him, their presence a guiding light on his path to new beginnings. Part 10. Epilogue. Peter's journey took him to distant lands, each filled with their own beauty and inspiration. From the bustling streets of Paris to the serene landscapes of Kyoto, he immersed himself in the cultures and landscapes that had long captured his imagination. Everywhere he went, he found new stories to tell through his art, each painting reflecting the richness of his experiences and the depth of his emotions. His exhibitions in international galleries were met with acclaim, and collectors eagerly sought out his work. Peter's paintings, infused with a unique blend of passion and introspection, resonated with people from different walks of life. He found fulfillment in knowing that his art touched hearts and sparked conversations about resilience, healing, and the power of creativity. Throughout his travels, Peter kept in touch with Sarah, sharing stories and photos from his adventures. Her unwavering support continued to be a source of strength, grounding him amidst the whirlwind of success. Their friendship deepened with each exchange, their bond a testament to the enduring power of connection. One evening, as Peter sat in a quiet cafe in Barcelona, reflecting on his journey, he received a message from Sarah. It was a simple note of encouragement, reminding him of how far he had come and how proud she was of him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he read her words, grateful for her presence in his life. As the years passed, Peter's reputation as an artist grew, and he continued to push the boundaries of his creativity. He collaborated with other artists, participated in international art festivals, and even started his own foundation to support emerging artists facing adversity. But amidst his professional success, Peter never forgot the lessons he had learned from his darkest moments. He remained committed to his mental health, continuing therapy and staying connected with his support network. He understood the importance of balance and self-care, knowing that his well-being was essential to his artistic vision. One day, while visiting a small gallery in Tokyo, Peter came across a painting that spoke to him on a deep level. It was a hauntingly beautiful piece, filled with raw emotion and exquisite detail. He learned that the artist, a young woman named May, had recently experienced a devastating loss. Inspired by her story, Peter reached out to May, offering words of encouragement and support. Their friendship blossomed, and May became a mentee of sorts, learning from Peter's experiences and guidance. Together, they collaborated on a series of paintings that explored themes of grief, resilience, and hope. Their joint exhibition received critical acclaim, further cementing Peter's reputation as a mentor and advocate for emerging artists. As Peter stood in front of the audience during the opening night of their exhibition, he reflected on his journey. From the depths of despair to the heights of artistic achievement, his life had been a testament to the transformative power of perseverance and the healing potential of art. And as he looked out at the faces in the crowd, seeing the impact his work had on others, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for Sarah, who had stood by him through it all. Gratitude for Dr. Jacobs and the support group, who had helped him find his voice again. And gratitude for every person who had believed in him along the way. In that moment, Peter realized that while his journey had been marked by pain and struggle, it had also been illuminated by moments of beauty and connection. He had found purpose in his passion, strength in his vulnerability, and a community of kindred spirits who shared his belief in the healing power of art. As he stood on that stage, bathed in the warm glow of the gallery lights, Peter knew that his journey was far from over. There were still canvases waiting to be filled, stories waiting to be told, and hearts waiting to be touched. The end.